99.1 Orinda Shenandoah.
Thanks for joining us tonight on KMA for this Candidates Forum featuring the two candidates running for Iowa's 3rd Congressional District, Zach Nunn and Cindy Axne. Now, tonight's moderator and host, KMA's own Mike Peterson.
Good evening. On November 8th, voters will go to the polls to decide who will serve in the U.S. House of Representatives in Iowa's 3rd Congressional District. Now, redistricting following the 2020 census changed this district, which now covers 21 counties across Iowa. Tonight, KMA News hosts a special one-hour forum featuring the two candidates running for a 2-year term in the House. Congresswoman Cindy Axne, the Democrat incumbent seeking her 3rd term, and State Senator Zach Nunn, who defeated 2 other candidates in the June Iowa primary for the Republican nomination. Here's the format for tonight's forum. Now, each candidate is allowed a 2-minute opening statement. We'll have those in just a moment. Then they'll answer a series of questions based on a wide range of topics. Each candidate is allowed 2 minutes to answer a question. However, if one of the candidates mentions the other in answering a question at the end of the round, the other candidate is allowed a 30-second rebuttal. However, I ask each of the candidates to try to follow this format as close as possible in order to avoid a free-for-all. We've got a lot of questions we want to get in an hour, and so we hope we can just kind of stick with the program, so to speak. Now, each candidate is also allowed a 2-minute closing statement. Now, the speaking order was determined by a lot about 15 minutes before we started. We drew numbers before tonight's forum, and Congresswoman Axne drew number 1, so you will go first for both the opening and closing statement. Senator Nunn will get to answer the first question, then we'll alternate the speaking order between questions. So let's get started for tonight's candidates forum and the opening statement from Congresswoman Cindy Axne.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, all the folks here at KMA, and hello, all of you out there in KMA land. Great to be here in Shenandoah. I've had the opportunity, of course, to be on KMA every week since I've been in this office for the last 4 years, and I'm so pleased to be able to be back here today talking with all of you about the issues that our country faces and absolutely those that are most important to Iowa's 3rd District. I am the proud Congresswoman, humbled and just so grateful to be able to serve the great people here in this state. I'm a 5th-generation Iowan, a mom of 2 boys, a small business owner along with my husband, and before becoming your Congresswoman, spent a decade in state government, serving under both Democratic and Republican governors, making sure that our government functioned effectively and efficiently for the people that it served. It's been a desire of mine for a lifetime to literally have government work for the people that it should be supporting. And I believe that when government does work well, it can be a huge asset to our families. It's been something I'm pushing for nonstop. But a few of the things that I've been busy over the last few years with have been, of course, making sure that we get through COVID intact, keeping Main Street alive here in Shenandoah and all across KMA land, making sure that our farmers had the funding to continue to supply the food and fuel for this country and this world. Of course, not stopping there, addressing the derelict bridges, the hundreds of miles of highway, the lead pipes in our systems, and our lack of broadband through voting for the infrastructure bill, the most monumental piece of legislation this country's seen when it comes to that. Lowering the cost of your prescription drugs with the latest Inflation Reduction Act, making sure that you don't pay any more than $2,000 out of pocket for your prescription drugs and $35 maximum for your insulin. And that's just the beginning of lowering prescription drugs across the board. And then finally, bringing jobs back here to Iowa to make sure we can compete and address the inflationary issues that we're facing with our supply chain. I'm so grateful to be here tonight, and I look forward to this conversation.
All right, thank you. Now the opening statement from State Senator Zach Nunn.
Thank you so much, Mike. My name is Zach Nunn. I want to first of all thank KMA Land. We were just out here in Shenandoah over at the Sanctuary yesterday, meeting amazing people up and down Main Street. And that's what this is really about. Whether you're coming from the combine tonight or you're out in your tractor trailer pulling a lot of grain, we saw beans being cut and corn being harvested. And that's what this season's all about, which is why I thought it was so important to be on KMA land, to be able to talk to the folks who are out there doing the hard work of Iowa. Look, we're 6th generation Iowa farm family, Century Farm. Our family grew up here doing row crop and sheep. My dad was a public school teacher. My mom was a nurse. We grew up on the east side of Polk County, and since then we have loved being part of this community. You know, after school, I went and served in the U.S. military like so many people in Iowa. I did combat tours twice in Afghanistan, another in Iraq, and then had the privilege of leading the Iowa Air National Guard in operations off the coast of Russia and Syria. We're honored to get to serve this community because it's the community that helped raise my wife, Kelly, and I. We're both lifelong Iowans. We've got 4 kids. And while we met on the gridiron on a Friday night, we were on the marching band side. So somehow we made the French horn section and the saxophone section work, and we've been working together ever since. We've got 2 amazing foster kids that we picked up in December. And what we've done here at the State House is to be able to deliver on things that are meaningful to Iowans. Iowa can be a leader that can be a playbook for the rest of the country. And let me talk about this. For Iowa, we've been able to cut your taxes by $2 billion, eliminate the retirement tax so more people can stay in our community. For our farmers, end the death tax, and make sure that we have the ability that farmers get to keep more of their retirement money tax-free. This is huge. We've also invested over $100 billion to make sure that our economy can grow with broadband for rural Iowa. We want to be able to take not just what works here for parents' rights in a time of COVID, but also that we support our community with law enforcement. These are the things that we've been successful, we've delivered on them, and I think it's something that Washington, D.C. would do well to take heed of.
All right, thank you very much, State Senator. And now let's get to our questions for this evening. This first set of questions has to deal with the economy. Here's our first question. In the last 12 months, the Consumer Price Index has risen 8.3%, with the food and energy prices going up. Has the federal government done enough to cap rising prices? If not, what steps would you like to see taken? And Senator Nunn, you go first in this question.
Mike, thank you. I think this is an issue that cuts across party lines here. We talk with Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. We've knocked on over 100,000 doors in this 3rd district, and what we hear overwhelmingly is the economy and inflation are having a devastating impact on people. Look, I talked with a teacher here who went on a date night to Casey's. She got a pizza and filled up her car. It was $100. She said that was the most expensive date night she'd had since her honeymoon. Iowans across the board are feeling the pinch of vast federal spending that is driving up everyone's costs. In fact, it's taking $6,000 out of your pocket and mine. That's a real impact on families and communities. It means local schools are paying more for gas for buses. It means counties and the state are paying a lot more for our law enforcement. This is the direct result of an unbridled D.C., a tax and spend agenda that has put in almost $3.8 trillion in additional spending. But while Washington tells us we need to tighten our belts and not spend so much, they'll pass an Inflation Reduction Act, so-called, that puts 87,000 new tax collectors out there coming after small businesses like ours. Look, the reality is small businesses are the ones that are most impacted by aggressive tax policies, not the big guys. Additionally, we have a situation where inflation has caused massive challenges to workforce and supply chain. If you're out in the field right now, you know it. You've been filling up that truck with diesel and you know it's almost $5 a gallon. But instead of being energy independent, we've made ourselves dependent on foreign powers like Russia and Venezuela that sell us dirty oil. We have the opportunity to be successful here in Iowa with things like biodiesel and year-round ethanol. But this administration has made that more difficult. Let's do what works in Iowa. Put money back in Iowans' pockets. Watch our economy, our hometowns, our families grow. When we are able to cut back on the size of the federal government, we'll see a much better success at local government, because that's truly where innovation works. And every single Iowan has the opportunity to be a part of the success, and that's what we'd like to see going to Washington day one.
All right, thank you very much, Senator. And now we go to Congresswoman Cindy Axne.
Thank you, Mike. You know, as a mom of 2 boys, certainly I understand the families, the pinch that they're feeling these days. You know, gas is more expensive, bread costs a little bit more, a gallon of milk costs more, meat's more expensive. So we're working to address those issues because I want to make sure that you put money in your pockets. And I do believe that what we're doing is working. We came out of COVID, just like the rest of the world did, with massive supply chain issues because we're reliant on so many other countries for the products that we need here. And so that left us in a bind. So what we need to do, folks, is invest in this country and reinvest in American workers again, which is what we've done. First thing, let's get things working again. My 7-point supply chain management agenda, which I've talked to you about before, Mike, which included the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, we got done. We started moving those goods out of port, even though they were being held up by those ocean ship carriers who were getting more money, hightailing it back to China to get more goods and bring them back here, leaving our goods stuck there. We lowered the price of gas, and you've seen it come down month after month here, because we forced those fossil fuel companies to start producing at pre-COVID levels. They stopped producing because they put more money in their shareholders' pockets as opposed to putting money in yours. And then we got busy even further with the CHIPS and Science Act to start producing goods in this country again. We will no longer be beholden to other countries for the semiconductor chips we need. When your car needs them, your phone needs them, your toaster needs them, and we can't get the appliances we need. We lowered the cost of your prescription drugs, putting money right in your pocket, starting with diabetes insulin, capping that at $35 a month, and moving towards dozens of drugs in Medicare throughout the next several years. Also capping your out-of-pocket expenses for prescription drugs at $2,000. And we're creating energy here in Iowa, capitalizing on my work that I've done for biofuels to expand that across the country, a year-round E15, and infrastructure, my $500 million bill to push our product throughout this country.
All right, thank you very much. Your time is up. And now let's get to the next question. Farmers in KMA land are seeing increased input costs with fertilizer and fuel. What can be done to help control those costs and ensure farming remains profitable? Congressman Axne, you get to go in this question.
Thank you. Well, listen, as a fifth-generation Iowan who spent my summers on my grandparents' farm outside of Milo in Warren County, I'm acutely aware of the input costs for farmers and what we need to do to ensure that those are reasonable so that they can get a profit. I know our farmers work hard on a regular basis to make sure that they're not just feeding and fueling this world, but of course making sure that they can put some money in their pockets. This year, like many other products that we've seen where we're reliant on other countries to produce what we need, we have not had the supplies to produce the fertilizer in an effective way such that it could be cost effective. Well, I'm taking care of that. Along with the administration, we have already started reducing the cost of fertilizer. The farmers are already seeing it, and we will continue to do that. It should be some of those some of the products within the fertilizers should be produced right here in America, and that's something that I'm going to be pushing for. We're reliant on other countries for those key ingredients of our fertilizer, and we shouldn't be. We've got to be producing those items here in America so that our farmers don't suffer any longer. So I'm addressing that right now. And then we also passed out of the House a bill that I was a co-lead on, the Food and Fuels Act, which addresses the cost of fertilizer and creates a system such that the federal government can work with those producers and other countries to lower those costs. So we've passed a bill out of the House to allow us to do that. It's time we get this written into law with the Senate's approval. So we're actively working on making sure that those input costs come down every single day. I would also, like to say that this Food and Fuel Act addresses transparency in the market. I'm working on a bill with Senator Grassley right now and Randy Feenstra to make sure that we have cattle market transparency so that our cattle market here in Iowa can thrive, so that our producers who are being left out of the contracted market have an opportunity for a fair shake and get the best price that they can get. That's part of the Food and Fuels Act. I will continue to work on lowering the cost for our farmers and increasing their opportunity.
Your time is up, Congresswoman, and now we go to Senator Zach Nunn.
Thank you. Well, first off, I want to say thanks again to all the farmers that are out there. We were the only candidate endorsed by the Farm Bureau. So to the 160,000 farm members out there, we not only hear you, but we've been working hard for you. Here's the reality. Look, in Iowa, we have done the right thing. We know how expensive things have been, and so we have made sure that we have put caps out there. We've worked diligently to make sure that there are tax cuts for those of you who have made an investment in your farm. We have eliminated the tax on retirement income, and we've also gotten rid of the death tax so that we can have the opportunity to have a generational farm like our own, a century farm, be successful. Importantly, we also want to make sure that we get new farmers into this business because that's what sustains Iowa and our 87,000 successful small farms across our state. Look, I have to disagree with my opponent on this. They say that gas prices are coming down. Anybody who's gone to the gas station in the last 17 days has continued to see it ratchet up. And it's coming right at harvest season. A time where farmers don't get the opportunity to demand what prices because we're price takers, meaning that we have to accept what the market's delivering. When it comes specifically to fertilizer, this administration said 3 times that the Ukraine was going to fall and there was nothing the U.S. could do about it. Well, we here in Iowa sent helmets, sent body armor, and made sure the Ukrainians had what they needed to fight back. But what Russia did was go directly after the largest fertilizer plant in the country. They're intentionally trying to make things painful for us, and it is bad policy coming out of Washington, D.C. that's driving up fertilizer prices. In some cases, as I talked with Ray Gasser over in Adams County, as much as 325%. That has a direct impact, not just on how much you can plant and care for, but whether you decide to plant at all going forward. This is a dangerous situation. If we're truly going to be a country that not only can feed and fuel the world, we've got to be able to make sure that our farmers are successful going forward. And that means doing more domestically, both in energy, supply chain, and workforce through young farmer programs to keep us successful across the board.
All right, thank you very much, Senator. And now our next question in this topic. The Biden administration recently canceled $10,000 in student loan debt for most borrowers and up to $20,000 for certain people. If this action survives a court challenge, do you think it will have a positive or negative effect on the economy? Senator Nunn, you could answer this question first.
Thanks, Mike. First off, I think it's an illegal act by an executive order. There's a very clear responsibility in the Constitution under the first article that Congress should be allocating and holding debts accountable. But the president has gone forward, and my opponent has voted 100% of the time, more than AOC, an extreme progressive from New York area, to support this. Here's why I think it's dangerous, going forward or not in the court challenge. This puts everybody who has done it the right way at odds with their own government. This puts everybody who didn't go to college in the situation of paying somebody else's loan. And this creates a dangerous precedent for those who are currently in college trying to afford their way through. And look, I've got 5 daughters and a son. We think every day about our long-term savings, and this inflation has tanked it by over 22%. The reality here is there are great ways here in Iowa if you want to go to college. If you want to be a nurse, we'll pay for 4 years of college for you. But in return, you got to come to a great community like Cass Health up the street and be a nurse. If you'd like to be an educator and go into teaching, we'll pay for your education degree and help you pay that back in addition to the local area. But we ask that you come and stay in Iowa and work at one of our rural schools. The federal government's gone the complete opposite way. They've been handing out $20,000 checks, $10,000 checks to people, some who didn't even graduate, and asking you and me to pay for it. That's inherently unfair, particularly for the schools and jobs that we need most. And these are our trade schools. Imagine what just a starting wage would help with for an electrician to get his first tool set, or a carpenter to get their first duty truck. These are the type of incentive programs that we've worked on here in Iowa, and I feel very proud of, because those are the jobs that we need. We're not handing out tens of thousands of dollars and driving up inflation to the tune of $1 trillion, because all the money they said they were going to save during the Inflation Reduction Act, they spent a week later in handing out loans liquidation to many people who didn't even need it, making $100,000. That's harmful to working class Iowans, and that's not something we'll be doing going forward.
Thank you, Senator. Congresswoman Axne.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Just to make perfectly clear, since my opponent over here brought up what he said I voted for with Biden, first and foremost, the president doesn't vote. Secondly, this was the president's agenda, had nothing to do with Congress. Anybody knows that. Everybody knows that. He's trying to make up a narrative there that combines it, and it doesn't. Just to be clear, folks, this was President Biden. Congress didn't take a vote. He knows that, but he's trying to blend that. So here's the situation. I would have done things differently, Mike, absolutely. I certainly believe that we need to make sure that we're supporting all levels of post-secondary education. Whether our kids want to do trade schools and apprenticeship programs, go to a 2-year college. We've got some incredible 2-year community colleges out here for robotics programs, so many other great healthcare programs, and of course 4-year colleges. And that's for folks who want to get retrained as well. I want you to know I care about you. We need to make sure you have the skill sets that you need. Now, in regard to the student loan debt, yes, the economists have said it will benefit the economy. That was your question, so I want to answer that. Yes, it has. And one of the key provisions in there that I like, that I want to do in other bills, and that I'm actually behind a bill on, is that we cap how much people pay back on their student loans relative to their income. No more than 5% of your monthly income then would be spent as part of this law on repayment. And that repayment goes to your loan first. That means your loan doesn't increase and your interest doesn't continue to increase. Those are the kinds of smart things that we should be doing. I wouldn't have done what the president done. I would have looked at it differently. That provision within there, though, I think is smart because it will put money in people's pockets. And it's a bill that I'm going to move forward on expanding, which is a bill to cap federally backed loans at 1% interest rate and then cap that loan repayment at 5%. And only on loan repayments is what you get first as opposed to interest. We got to fix this problem, and it's a good way to get it done.
Okay, time is up. Senator Nunn, do you want a 30-second rebuttal on that?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Look, here's the reality. My opponent has looked at forgiving loans. She's voted on that. The administration made an executive order. There was no pushback against the administration whatsoever. And the worst part is that not only are we all paying for this, but we're driving up the cost of college for future students. Now, universities and colleges are looking at getting a $10,000, even $20,000 bump in what they can charge students, making it even more likely only the very elite get to go to college and not everybody in Iowa.
All right, then we're going to move on now to our next set of questions. The next question involves immigration and border security. That's our next topic. Recently, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis used state funds to fly illegal immigrants from Texas to sanctuary districts such as Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Do you agree with this move? I'll repeat the question. Recently, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis used state funds to fly illegal immigrants from Texas to sanctuary districts such as Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Do you agree with this move? Congresswoman Axne, you get to answer this question first.
Yes, well, we have to address immigration reform in this country, and it's something that I've been saying we need to get done for years now. Obviously to address the security at our border, but making sure that we're a country that's welcoming. We all come, from many cases, from immigrants. And so I want to make sure that the system works for all. Absolutely not do I support what that governor did. He took people's lives and played with them. It was very inhumane to do so. These were children. They did not know what was happening. The sad thing is that too many people in the Republican Party are unfortunately making a spectacle out of the immigration issues that we face, dehumanizing people as a result of it, and actually not accomplishing anything good, making the system worse. So what we have to do, folks, is fix the problem. But we're not going to get there when governors use taxpayer dollars to fly immigrants across the country, take them out of any normalcy that they have, scare them half to death, and thank goodness for some good people in those areas where these folks landed who helped them out. Governor DeSantis should be ashamed of himself for doing this. What a stunt. Unacceptable to behave like that as an elected official in this country. If he wants to fix immigration, he can come to the table any day of the week because the Democrats are ready to do this. I have been since I started running for this seat in 2017. It's time we get it done, but we do not have enough courageous leaders who will step up and say, let's do this holistically. I listen to Iowa soybean come in, corn, all of our farmers, healthcare providers here in Iowa. They come into my office in D.C. They say we need workers and we need immigration reform. And I couldn't agree with them more. I say talk to your Republican senators. They've been the ones that are stopping it.
All right, Senator Nunn.
Look, this is both a national security and a humanitarian crisis, and Washington is doing absolutely nothing about it. You want to talk about 50 individuals being sent to Martha's Vineyard? They call out 175 National Guard members, and then 3 days later, deported them out of that area. But where was the outrage when 53 migrants died in the back of a tractor trailer because they were left in the sun after the drivers were recruited as American teenagers who weren't prosecuted under Texas law on I-35 bound to places like Iowa? Look, I've been to the border. I've done operational missions with the National Guard on the border. My opponent has not. And they can talk about what they want to do, but they've done nothing. Here in Iowa, we led the passage of the ability to check legal immigrants coming in and make sure that we had a migrant force coming in. Now, if we were to look at the southern border right now, you would see in the time since my opponent and Biden have been elected, 4 million illegals have entered this country, and they've been put in an impossible situation where they can't work, they can't care for their family, and they are indebted not to the United States, but to a cartel which holds them hostage and their families back home. We spoke with a woman who had a 9-year-old who had been raped repeatedly because she was being used by coyotes to get people across the border because she had a small child to get military-age men across. Look, the reality is when I went down there, I rode with Customs and Border Patrol. I saw people who wanted to come to this country desperately, And they waited in line for some cases a decade and had received no help, and so came here illegally because it was the only chance they had. Worst of all, fentanyl, a Chinese-produced drug, is now coming to the United States, and it's the #1 killer of our children between the ages of 18 and 34. When I was there, a backpack was found, and in there 2 pounds of fentanyl were discovered. That's enough to kill 500,000 people, or to put it into another perspective, the entire city of Des Moines. These are weapons of mass destruction. Our leadership in D.C. has a responsibility to fix this, and they've ignored it repeatedly.
All right, Senator Nunn, as Congresswoman, you get a 30-second rebuttal, and then we'll move on.
So listen, I don't need to go to the border on taxpayer dollars just to pull a publicity stunt. I work on this issue with my colleagues in Washington on a regular basis. I'm going to talk with the folks that actually represent those areas, and it's not, and also look holistically at this issue. We absolutely need to protect our southern border. We also have ports of authority where we have to make sure we're addressing mostly drug trafficking as well. So there's a lot to look at here. And again, I'll go back to the fact, come to the table, and let's talk full immigration reform.
Okay, time is up on that particular topic. Our next question stays within the realm of immigration. The next question is, if elected, in Zach Nunn's case, or re-elected with a congresswoman, what concrete step would you like to see Congress take on immigration policy? Senator Nunn, you get to answer this question first.
Thanks, Mike. I think this is a really important issue. I went to the border on my own dime, and at least I went to the border because it was important, and here's why. I talked with educators, I talked with farmers, I talked with people who need legal migrants coming to our country. You know, when the administration abandoned Afghanistan and the flag fell over that country, it left behind thousands of Americans, including Afghanis like Nabi Mohammadi, a guy who had done 9 combat tours with us in Afghanistan, 20 years of service, and our country abandoned him after telling him he had the opportunity to come here illegally. Well, we didn't stand by. As a veteran, we volunteered and we flew 5 aircraft over and saved thousands of Americans and their allies and brought them here. And I'm proud to say Nabi Mohammadi is now a U.S. citizen. His family is here, and they are in the process of becoming U.S. citizens. We have a pathway to bring good individuals who are highly needed into our communities successfully. But what we shouldn't do is put them in that impossible situation of 4 million plus illegal migrants coming across the border with no pathway to clear citizenship because this administration has ignored them. Here's what I'd do day one. I'd make sure we secure the border firmly, that we have a clear pathway to be able to bring migrants into our country who are needed. If you're claiming amnesty, let's pull those federal judges from across the country down to the southern border, set up 24-hour night courts, and make sure if you need to come to this country because you're being persecuted, we find you a legal pathway to get here and get to work. But if you're not, if you're coming here illegally, then you're turned around and sent away. Look, this is not only a national security issue, this is the humanitarian crisis, and that's why I've been so proud to lead the Combat Human Trafficking Center here in Iowa. Far too often, people are being exploited, both for labor but for sex trade. And here in Iowa, we've worked diligently with our law enforcement and frontline communities to be able to help these individuals be saved, often from a life of crime and servitude, not paying here in the United States, but deep into cartels that span the world. 160 different countries and 77 terrorists came across the border this year. This has to stop, and the federal government's responsible for it.
Okay, your time is up. Let's go to Congresswoman Axne.
Thank you, Mike. As I've mentioned, we need to make sure that there's full immigration reform. That's looking at this holistically. We need to make sure that those folks who've grown up here, those dreamers that see nothing but Iowa as their community, have an opportunity to become citizens. We also need to make sure that undocumented immigrants who are playing by the rules have a pathway to citizenship. Our country has been founded on immigrants. Our country is founded on new opportunity and hope that these people bring here. Opportunities for new businesses on Main Street, helping with our farm production, healthcare providers, all those folks looking for a better opportunity where they can benefit us right here in our own backyard. Let's make sure that we get that process together and move these folks into citizenship through a pathway that allows those who are playing by the rules without a criminal background to become citizens. We also need to make sure that we support the border more with more funding for legal services there to move people through the system more quickly and effectively and efficiently. Support our border security, ensure that they've got the funding to protect our borders. I've voted for multiple bills that included border security, included drones, fencing, walls in some areas. And we've also I increased and voted for funding for our Customs Enforcement Bureau, as well as the legal folks who are taking care of all the issues as people come in, and our Border Patrol. I have voted twice to fund this. So any misconception that I don't support border security is completely wrong. I actually have a record of supporting it and making sure that we protect this country. But again, I will go back to the fact that unfortunately we just don't have enough people who go to Washington and have the courage to do this. They'll talk a big talk, but they don't want to get up to the table and get this job done because they're going to be in an election year. I've told people all along, I'm ready to talk about this and get this done. It's the right thing to do for our country, and it's the right thing to do for these folks who are seeking refuge.
Okay, Congresswoman, your time is up. And now let's move on to another topic in tonight's forum. The topic is abortion. Earlier this year, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, which declared a constitutional right into an abortion. Now, the question is, do you support the High Court's decision on this issue? Again, earlier this year, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, which declared a constitutional right to an abortion. Do you support the High Court's decision on this issue? Congresswoman, you get to answer this question first.
Yeah, I support Roe v. Wade, which was the law of the land before the Republican-stacked court stripped this country from its rights. We woke up one day and our girls, our daughters, had less rights than our sons. The law of the land that we thought was part of the fabric of this country was completely thrown out the window and gutted. We should be trusting women in this country. Government does not have a right to be in our bedroom, in our bodies, in our doctor's office, or the decisions between our women, their families, and their doctors on family planning. And that's why I voted for the Women's Healthcare Protection Act to codify Roe v. Wade, because women should be making these decisions, not government. And I will stand by that every step of the way. Unfortunately, my opponent supports banning abortion in all cases. As a matter of fact, just a few months ago, and you may have seen this on TV, he raised his hand 3 times. When the moderator asked him, so you don't support abortions even in the case of rape? He said, no, I don't. You don't support them even in the case of incest? He said, no, I don't. You don't support them even in the case of a mother's life? He raised his hand, no. In 2017, this man voted for an abortion bill with no exceptions for rape or incest. No exceptions for rape or incest. In 2020, he voted for the 6-week abortion ban, which we all know most women have no idea if they're pregnant by 6 weeks. We do not need men or government telling women what to do with their bodies. We do not need them telling us how we are to address our health care issues. And as a matter of fact, if I'm going to trust anyone on this issue, I will always trust women. And under my leadership, I will work to codify Roe v. Wade so that this right is protected once again.
Congresswoman, your time is up, and now we go to Senator Zach Nunn.
Thanks, Mike. Look, the question was, do you support the Supreme Court or do you respect the Supreme Court's decision? I think, first of all, we have to recognize it's a separate branch of power, and its decisions, while we may not agree with them, do become the law of the land. And Congress, if it chooses to act, or the states choose to act, it has the ability to do it. In this case, they gave it back to the states, and I think that's where it begins with this conversation. So let's be very candid here. I've repeatedly answered this question while my opponent has never stated her true position. We believe that good people can have legitimate conversations on abortion and the health of the mother. I've always been in favor of the health of the mother and the health of the child, and that's what we have voted on consistently. We have voted for exceptions for the health of the mother, and in those extremely limited cases of rape and incest. But we've done more than just have this conversation. We have built a compendium of support for health care for women in Iowa. We've made sure that we have more telemedicine than ever before. We've voted to ensure that we can have over-the-counter contraception for women. And when mother and baby are together, we make sure that the health of both are successful going forward. And we have passed the Moms Act, an ability that once baby comes forward, they have the opportunity to be successful and set up. And in those rare situations where a mother feels that they can no longer care for their baby, we here in Iowa made sure that they have amnesty to be able to deliver that baby to one of the many families that want to foster, not unlike our own. We've also made it clear that adoptive services need to be a priority. Now, unfortunately, my opponent and folks in D.C. have lied to you. First of all, that 2017 bill that was mentioned, I was actually in the minority and voted against it, and yet it's completely wrong to continue to repeat a known falsehood, because this is unfortunately one of the only things that the Democrats in D.C. are trying to run on. They won't talk about inflation, they won't talk about how to fix it, they won't even state clearly where they are. Here in Iowa, we have a good voting record on this. We need to make sure that not only do we respect all three branches of government, but we make sure we respect Iowans by giving them the opportunity to have a voice, not federalize this issue.
Okay, Senator, your time is up. Congresswoman, you get a 30-second rebuttal, and then we're moving on.
Yes,
now,
yes.
I didn't mention her name, so I don't know why we're going back on this.
You mentioned me.
As an opponent.
Yeah, you did say the opponent, so go ahead, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Mike. Let's be perfectly clear. This man was on TV, asked by a reporter 3 times if he was supportive of an abortion even in the case of rape. He said no. Even in the case of incest, he said no. Even in the case of a mother's life, he said no. And he has been in support of the bills that have taken this right away from women.
All right,
it will happen.
I would like to respond, Mike. She lied.
All right,
3
you
times
get 30
right there.
seconds, and
Thank
that's
you.
it, and then we're moving on.
First of all, I never said any of those things, and you can watch the videotape and the debate in its entirety, and you see that I actually stopped the conversation so that we could have a fulsome conversation, not make this what Democrats want, a binary conversation. Finally, she lied about our 2017 vote because she is trying to paint all Republicans in a false light. Look, this is an important conversation, and we shouldn't be playing politics with it. Let's have honest conversations with Iowans about what's in their best interest and our state's best interest. The courts gave that to us. Let's take that forward.
All right, and once again, I remind you to try to stick to the form because we still have a lot of territory we have to cover in the next 28 minutes or so. We're going to stay with the abortion issue for one more question, and our next question is, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham recently introduced a bill that would institute a nationwide ban on abortion. Now, is this something you support, or do you believe abortion restrictions should be left up to the individual states? Senator Nunn, you get to answer this question first.
Thanks, Mike. So, as I just highlighted, I think this is very important to be left to the states. That's what Dobbs done. We here in Iowa have led on a number of good bills, and I would stand up to anyone, whether they're Democrat or Republican, if they try and federalize this as my opponent's done.
All right. Congresswoman Axne.
No, I do not support a nationwide ban on abortion. I support the exact opposite, that women get to make the choice for their health care in this country. I'm in this job right now and able to represent this great state of ours because I was able to plan my life. I was able to, along with my husband, determine our family's growth. And I'm very proud that I was able to have that opportunity to do that. Today, girls are no longer allowed that opportunity, and that's why government should not be involved in this decision. Now, whenever you hear this terminology about moving it to states for them to decide, that is code word for literally moving it to a Republican state for them to institute the 6-week fetal heartbeat bill like my opponent was in support of and that the governor wants to bring back to the table. She's already said that she would. She won't do it now before the election because she knows that Americans and Iowans don't want this, and she could lose the election. And so what we have here is a situation where we have the most extreme positions on abortion coming from the Republican Party. Whether it is Lindsey Graham, whether it is the bill that's on the floor with over 178 Republicans in the House, that would literally create a bill that is a bill upon conception. This is where they want to go, folks. Don't believe what you're hearing. It's real easy for them to say words that make it sound like they support opportunities for women. Make it very clear to you that Republicans in the state and in the federal government are ready and poised to pass abortion bills that will ban abortion for women all across this district, all across the state, with no exceptions. You can see this in all the information that's out there. They're lying about it. And it's a dangerous place for this country to be, especially if you're a woman.
Congresswoman, your time is up. Senator Nunn, you want a 30-second rebuttal?
Yes, thank you very much, Mike. As you can see, the only person lying here tonight has done it repeatedly. Let's be very clear. I have an amazing wife. I would never put her in a situation where her life would be in danger. I have 5 incredible daughters, and it's going to be important for them to be able to take care of themselves. That's why we've passed so many bills here in Iowa to make sure their health care is provided for. Now, here's the difference. The only group that post-Dobbs has actually voted on this has been D.C. Democrats. D.C. Democrats want a taxpayer-funded abortion on demand until the birth of the child. Even in those situations where that child might survive, they would still allow for it to be
All right,
killed.
Senator, your time is up. Congresswoman, you get a 30-second rebuttal, and then we are moving on.
Yes, I have voted twice to pass the Women's Reproductive Health Care Act. So Women's Health Care Protection Act, folks. That is a vote to codify Roe v. Wade. What we want to do is take this country to where we were. The law of the land gave women the opportunity to make their choice. That's what we need to do, codify Roe v. Wade, and make sure that women in this country, once again, have opportunity like men.
All right, thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to another topic, and this topic has to do with energy policy, including some issues that have some local importance to folks here in KMA land. Our first question is, one of the hottest issues right now in KMA land involves proposed wind turbine projects, including Invenergy's proposed Shenandoah Hills wind farm that would straddle the Fremont and Page County line. Now the question is, do you support wind turbine projects as part of the U.S. energy strategy? Again, do you support wind turbine projects as part of the U.S. energy strategy? Congresswoman Axne, you get to answer this question first.
Yeah, well, we absolutely need to be producing energy here in this country and become a lot less reliant on other countries for the energy that we need. We absolutely are leaders here in Iowa, and as a matter of fact, I had the opportunity to lead the Energy and Environment Plan at the state of Iowa, helping to make Iowa #2 in wind energy production. So I'm very proud of what our state has done to move us towards energy independence. And of course, with that wind production, we're going to get real close to producing, over 50% of our energy here with wind, and adding solar to that will take us even higher. We've got huge opportunity here in Iowa to not just benefit from wind and solar, but to also make money from it. Now, I do understand the point of these folks who say it disrupts their lives and they're concerned about it for their communities. We absolutely should be working with communities on how we can address those issues. I want to make sure that we have every opportunity here in Iowa to expand our growth in this sector, sell it outside of our state, use as much as we possibly can here to lower costs for individuals and for businesses, but then to also make profitability off it. Our farmers do well with wind turbines on their land. They certainly do well with the push for ethanol. And of course, as chair of the Biofuels Caucus, I will always be in support of making that our farmers have that opportunity. And thank you, Iowa Corn, for endorsing me, because I will always stand up for our farmers and push our clean fuel across this country. So I want to see us continue to expand on wind, but we certainly need to be looking to those communities and answering their questions and finding solutions. If we can upgrade these wind turbines to address those issues that these communities are facing, whether it's noise or whatever their concerns are, we should be able to do those types of things for them. It's not as if people don't want to have clean energy. They also just want to make sure that their lifestyle isn't too much impacted by it. So let's talk to those communities. Let's see what we can do. But in the end, I will always support renewable energy.
All right, Congresswoman, and now we go to Senator Nunn.
Thank you very much, Mike. Look, this is a self-inflicted injury, the fact that the United States is no longer energy independent. And sadly, it's come about over the last 22 months since Biden's been elected. We've been from a country that does an all-of-the-above solution, not just wind, but solar, biofuel, bioethanol, renewables, fossil fuels, clean fossil fuels. But now we're buying oil from Russia at $120 a barrel, basically paying for them to attack our ally, Ukraine. At the same time, we've dived deeper than ever into the strategic fuel reserve, oil that's only meant to be used in times of war or national emergency, while at the same time shoveling barrels off to places like China. Now, I talked to a number of supervisors both in Fremont, Page, and Madison County about windmills. And for a lot of them, they feel that there's a great opportunity to have wind energy in Iowa, and it has been a successful green energy in part of our compendium of energy independence. But for far too many folks, they feel like they have no voice in how this is happening. Absentee landlords, many who live in places like California and New York and donate to people all over the world, are finding themselves enriched, while others have to live up the street from massive wind farms that can create challenges to their health, beacon all night, and become a real blight on their ability to take care of their property and land. There are things that we should be doing. First amongst these is returning it back to our county supervisors and our local government to be able to have appropriate standoff for these, and to make sure that we're not subsidizing an industry which is supposed to be able to stand on its own. Equally, we shouldn't be in a position where we have massive turbine blades that have no place to go and end up being a blight or a danger going forward. Now, I'm very much in favor of an all of the above renewable energy program, and I think there's a lot that we can do in Washington to help those be successful, but we should never forget about the people who are living in the shadow of that. Folks in Des Moines and DC, you may not understand it, but they live there.
All right, Senator, your time is up. Let's move on now to another question that has some local significance. Another big issue in Iowa right now, especially in our area, is proposed carbon pipeline projects, including Summit Carbon Solutions' proposed Midwest Express CO2 pipeline project that would stretch across a good portion of western Iowa. Now, the question is, do you support the use of eminent domain to acquire property for these projects? Again, the question, do you support the use of eminent domain to acquire property for these projects? Zach Nunn, you get to answer this question first.
Thanks, Mike. So I think this is something that's very important, not just to Iowa, but to the entire country. If we're truly going to be energy independent, we have to make sure farmers' good can get to product area. And so that means making sure that our biodiesel and ethanol has the opportunity to do that. Carbon sequestration is a great way to capture that and move it forward. But eminent domain is a tool being used by a private entity to force through landowners is something that we need to be incredibly cautious about. Look, there's a lot of good ways to be able to move pipelines across America in ways that are safe. They're certainly better than using rail or truck, and they're far more economical in the long run with a smaller carbon footprint. Some of the best conservators in the world are farmers, and they feel very good about the opportunity to create energy right here in places like Iowa. We have a lot of options here, and for far too many, the private sector has tried to cut across people's land, spending very little time offering fair market value. So here's what I would suggest. Always, if there's the opportunity for a right-of-way, meaning an area that's owned by the state or the federal government, those should be the first priorities. Second, there needs to be transparency in pricing so that one farmer and another farmer are not pitted off against each other in a bidding war. This should be clean from the beginning. And then third, we need to make sure that we have the ability to move our precious commodities to the places where they can be processed, as well as be able to get them to ports in a safe, reliable fashion going forward. And the landowner, in those very rare circumstances where we need to find a way to get through, is fully compensated. This is why eminent domain has been an issue that we've worked on in the State House, and we've worked diligently with both the producer, the provider, and the landowner to be successful. And in almost every case that we've worked, we've been able to find a good common ground working with our local officials in the process. Unfortunately, the federal government has taken a very different tact on this. They've been rough on their mandates or shut it down completely in a complete reversal, making it much harder for us to not only be energy independent, but to continue to become more dependent on foreign sources of fuel for our country going forward.
All right, Senator, thank you very much. Congresswoman Axne.
Yeah, Mike, no, I don't support use of eminent domain for this project. Eminent domain should be used for public good. I don't think that this project rises to the level of that. Certainly our farmers' land should be used to produce the food and fuel that's so necessary for this country and for this world. I want to make sure that if we're cutting through their land, we're taking any of their property, if anybody's going after that, that there's going to be, something positive coming out about this. But for these private investors, they seem to be getting all the money, and our farmers and other landowners are going to be at the short end of the stick. I don't think this is a good use of eminent domain because it doesn't do enough for the public. Further, the carbon capturing with it is negligible. At the same time, it could cause damage to our soil, wreaking havoc on nutrients, certainly causing some opportunities for safety issues as well. So I'd like to see us look to other opportunities for capturing carbon and other ways where we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Things that we're working on like right now, as a matter of fact. As again, I will point out that I was able to expand E15 year-round, working with the administration and the president on that to make sure that our farmers could get more money in their pocket. My $500 million infrastructure build-out across this country for tanks and all of the things that are needed within those gas stations to improve and sell more ethanol, that made it into the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act that unfortunately was literally voted down by the Republicans because they didn't think that we needed to lower the cost of prescription drugs for our elderly folks here in Iowa. They didn't think that we needed to invest in climate issues and growing clean energy here in this country. And apparently they didn't think that we needed to invest in making sure that we put more money back in people's pockets through tax provisions that help the middle class.
Okay,
I'm actually making
Congressman,
sure that we
your
address
time is
these
up.
issues.
Your time is up, and while we're a little short of time right now, I want to jump into one question regarding another topic. The topic is Ukraine. Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin recently indicated he would consider using nuclear weapons in the war against Ukraine. The question is, should the United States consider bolstering its nuclear weapon arsenal as a result? Congresswoman, you get to answer this question, and we'll try to stick to the 2-minute time limit because we're running out of time.
Thank you, Mike. I've had the privilege of listening to the First Lady of Ukraine deliver her statement to Congress. The stories of the children, the families, lives that were lost, communities destroyed, are almost unbearable to hear. But she's traveling this country and talking to members of Congress and the president and other allies around the world to make sure that we can do whatever we can do to support them. I want to make sure that we help protect those folks in Ukraine. The sanctions that we put in place are working. They're moving forward every single day with greater opportunity for Ukraine to hold out and win. And I will continue to make sure that we support those endeavors in any way possible. So for me, it's important that we look at this from the perspective of protecting those lives in Ukraine. Now, you talked about nuclear weapons. I don't believe in the use of nuclear weapons. I don't believe that Russia should even be thinking about dropping nuclear weapons. What we need to be doing here as a country then is working with our allies to prevent this from ever coming to fruition. I'm not real keen on America continuing to build up its nuclear stockpile such that we can be ready to combat Russia. I think I'd have to have a little bit more information on that, Mike, based on the question that you asked me, to see what the right solution would be. Right now, I know the solution is to make sure that the folks in Ukraine have the support, the funding, the military equipment, and the sanctions in place that are keeping them moving forward against the aggression of Russia. And we've got to do everything we can to help them with that.
All right, thank you very much, Congresswoman. State Senator Zach Nunn.
Thank you very much, Mike. You know, this is a pressing national security issue, not just for the Ukrainians, but for what's happening here in Iowa. When we look at, again, that fertilizer, it's a direct result of Russian aggression and invasion of a sovereign country. Unfortunately, the Biden administration knows this all too well because when they were vice president, they allowed Russia to take Crimea, a strategic port, as well as expand into the eastern area of Ukraine. Now, as a military member, I've flown direct flights off the coast. I know exactly that MiG-29s coming at you don't respond to people who back down. And unfortunately, this administration, all the way 6 months ago, was prepared to sacrifice Ukraine over to the Russian juggernaut. Now, I've been in Ukraine. I was actually there as an election monitor. And I've seen grandmothers walk across landmine fields to be able to go and vote. And I knew at that time the Ukrainians not only were a hardy people, but a proud and independent people. And they have suffered intolerably. 7 million people already evacuating, but going back so that their sons and husbands could fight behind. And when they asked the United States for simple things like missile defense or air protection from strikes, the Biden administration told them no. But they could buy into long-term contracts with the Department of Defense so that maybe in 6 months or 6 years, they'd be resupplied. Unfortunately, the sanctions that the Biden administration put forward to deter things like a nuclear Russia have only been on oligarchs, and we've offered no off-ramp for the good Russians who want to come forward because we've sanctioned them all. The reality is, if you don't stand up to countries like Russia, you embolden places like Xi Jinping in Beijing, or the Ayatollah, as we're seeing in Tehran right now, when Iranian women are asking for American help and the Biden administration does nothing. Look, nuclear deterrence is peace through strength, but it should never come down to this, and it should never have gotten to this point. Overall, the U.S. military needs dramatic opportunities for reinvestment, not cuts.
All right, Senator, thank you very much. And now we have reached the end of our questioning on tonight's forum, and we have time for 2-minute closing statements from each candidate. Congresswoman Cindy Axne, you go first.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, all of you here at KMA, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. Very much appreciate you being a part of our democracy. It's a fragile thing, our democracy, something that we constantly have to stand up for. It's not just given to us. It's a right that we have, but something that we have to fight for. And I'm grateful for you participating tonight, because it couldn't be a more important time in our country's history to stand up for democracy and to stand up for the rights of people across this great country of ours. I've had the honor and the privilege of serving you for the last 4 years, being on this station every week, talking to you about the work that I'm doing. Whether it's on my bill to make sure that small towns like Shenandoah can get ahead with my Invest to Protect Act, which is a bill to help our police units, 125 and under, the vast majority of police units in Iowa, get the resources they need by not having to compete with cities like Des Moines or New York even. And right now they have to. So I'm fixing that to make sure that you have no more than a 2-hour grant program to write up, to get through, to get the funding that you need to keep our communities safe. I made sure that we kept Main Street alive during one of the worst downturns because of COVID that this country's seen, because I knew how important it was to keep money in your family's pockets. And then I decided to make sure that we did everything we possibly could to right the issues that we saw come out of COVID that aren't good for our country, the supply chain issues that we needed to solve, that we need to make sure we address for the future, which is why we're building things here in America again, because it's time we quit being beholden to other countries like China. And I'm there to make sure that we keep money in your pockets and keep your family safe by lowering your health care costs, lowering those out-of-pocket prescription drug costs for the first time, being able to negotiate those. And I will be here for you. I humbly ask for your vote. I will always be there for you and your family.
All right, thank you very much, Congresswoman. And now State Senator Zach Nunn, your closing statement.
Thank you, Mike, and KMA listening audience. Look, are you better off now than you were 2 years ago when the Biden-Axne team came in? We've seen 40-year high inflation. We've seen the retirement of so many of us evaporate before our eyes with an 8% inflation rate. We've been forced to be able to ask our government permission to be able to get our kids back in school while the federal government forces mandate after mandate upon us. In fact, my opponent even calling people who question this Christian crazies who hide behind God, the cross, or whatever. It's insulting. Iowans know the opportunities that they have, and they've taken them by the horns. Because we've been able to cut taxes for Iowans by billions of dollars, while the federal government has raised it by trillions. A 15% tax on small businesses, 87,000 new tax collectors coming into our communities. This isn't how you grow an economy. This isn't how you succeed. You trust Iowans and their innovative spirit. As we looked at federal shutdowns, Iowa was one of the first states to open up. Our reserves are full. We are successful going forward, and when we get that money, we give it back to Iowans. And as a result, our economy was one of the best to recover. This is the type of fiscal discipline and reward that Washington could benefit from. Look, I've been honored to be able to serve both Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Your family, like my family, has been hurting these past 2 years. But we can make a difference. We can stand up to a tax and spend Washington that's hurting communities across Iowa. I've been privileged to be part of this community for my entire life. I've fought for you, Iowa, on the battlefield on multiple tours. I've served for you the last 8 years in the State House, both in a Democrat-lean district, but by delivering, because it's not just about winning on Election Day, but delivering once you get into office. I've been humbled to be named the most bipartisan legislator at the State House by both Democrats and Republicans with the Hoover Award. I'm asking for the privilege of serving you in Washington. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Senator Nunn. And that concludes tonight's 3rd Congressional District Candidates Forum here on KMA. I would like to thank each of the candidates for participating tonight, as well as your respective campaigns. You folks have been great to work with. Didn't have to use or channel my dad's Marine Corps voice too much tonight. So thank you very much. And also, my big thanks goes out to Ryan Matheny, our producer and timekeeper, KMA engineer Mark Brockmeyer for his technical assistance, and boy, did we need it tonight, our board engineer Trevor Mader, and of course, cameraman Ethan Hewitt. And we would like to thank you for listening and watching tonight, and hope you enjoyed and found this event informative. And we'd like to remind you that you'll be hearing from both candidates again, as well as others, in the coming weeks in our Meet the Candidates interviews on KMA's Morning Line program. That's heard Monday through Friday morning at 7:35, so we're not through with either of you yet. Fair warning. And join us to find out who wins this race and others on Tuesday night, November 8th for Election Night in KMA Land. And don't forget to vote either in person at the polls or via absentee ballot. This is a very important election coming up on November 8th. So for all of us here on KMA News, I'm Mike Peterson. Thanks for watching or for listening